Back again for another video. On today's topic, we're going to be talking about how masculinity is created. I haven't thought of the video title. I'm not really good at that. Maybe I should hire someone to do that. Maybe put a submissive to work a little bit, tell her to listen to it and tell me what you think the title should be. I don't know. Anyways, the topic, of course, once again, is how masculinity is created. And I also want to talk about how it's crafted and how it is molded into the sharp spear that it should be, and the broad shield that it becomes as well. So, first thing I'm going to look at is a few topics that I've talked about before. I talked about women and their, and this has to do with women too, by the way. I'm not just talking about masculinity in men, but masculinity in women. But anyways, I've talked about how imprints work. How usually when it comes to a woman's imprint is usually by a man that was in her life earlier, before she started to become an actual adolescent, or actual adult woman. She was more than likely an adolescent in most cases. But when it comes to this imprint, there are different types. Okay, there's the mental imprint, and there is the physical imprint. There's the emotional imprint. There's the spiritual imprint. There's all different types of imprints. And I've talked about this on my other channel. And I think I've talked about this a little bit here. I deal mostly with the physical and emotional imprints of women, and sometimes the spiritual imprint of women. It depends on how close I get. It's all like levels. I mean, it's no different than the Maslow's hierarchy of needs or anything that you understand about chakra, and the different levels in that. It kind of goes along with each level actually being able to create an imprint on a woman. It also happened with men, but it looks a little bit differently. I'll get into that in another video. But anyways, when you're dealing with the physical and the emotional imprints of women, it's usually charged by, of course, emotional things and physical things that they've been through, right? But there's a certain way that these things need to be presented. And once again, most women's emotional and physical imprint starts very early in age. Their first emotional imprint is usually their fathers, right? But sometimes that is not the case. Sometimes their first emotional imprint is a traumatic experience. And also dealing with their physical experience. This is the reason why fathers handed their daughters off as virgins, because of the physical imprint. A male that was proper and trim, right? To take on this woman and imprint her correctly, so that she has a proper imprint from that man, from a man that is not her father, that represents the partial of the emotional and partial of the physical, and also the spiritual as well, right? So anyways, when women go through these things without the proper imprint, it usually amounts to trauma, right? I don't know if you, I define it as trauma personally. They might define it as just a situation. I mean, a lot of women think promiscuity is just something fun to do, but it's actually traumatic to a woman's imprint. Every time that she has sex with another man, and subsequently more men, she's damaging herself. Society is not going to tell her this. Society is going to tell her the same thing that we always hear, women's sexual liberation, this and that. But remember, I don't think they understand that men are the protectors, right? Why would a man who is a protector of his daughter want her to be promiscuous? That is to the contrary, according to a lot of our history across the globe when it comes to fathers and daughters. They wanted them as pure as possible because they were handing over something that didn't have traumatic experiences. And that was the lack of promiscuity, right? So you can infer that do the opposite of men being protectors, right? On the one side, and men wanting to give over the best product to another man in regards to their daughters, right? That would infer that he wanted to not have her go through any trauma, right? They don't give their daughters over to shitbag dudes. Let's just be honest. They don't give their daughters over to men who cannot provide. They don't give their daughters over to men who are emotionally insecure. They give their daughters over to men, and that's been the thing. That's for a long time. Many cultures and civilizations. I don't think I need to quote one. Okay, you get where I'm coming from. So anything opposite to that is traumatic, because men are not protecting from that. They are protecting from something when they try to keep a daughter's chastity intact. They're protecting. That's what they do. That's what men do. And why wouldn't a father want to protect his daughter? So once again, you have to infer that on the other side of this, when this protection is gone, everything else is traumatic and damaging. But of course, society tells women very differently. Of course, because they make money off of this. They are the modern day slaves in regards to consumerism, right? But we won't get into that here. My whole point of this is that when a woman does not have covering, she is going to go through traumatic experiences. That is the main point that I'm making here. Now, men, we go through traumatic experiences all the time. I mean, we're taught, we're imbued with traumatic response. I remember I said in my previous videos not too long ago that we are constantly in survival mode. That's how we are raised, and that's how we are created to be, in survival mode. So we handle trauma a lot differently than women do. They're not built for that level of trauma. Remember, their chastity was supposed to be kept intact. That trauma wasn't supposed to happen. Because here's something that you have to understand about these traumatic experiences. While men are built for this is also the reason why we see a lot of women going through a lot of stress. I mean, if you look at the number one killer for women, heart disease. Same thing for men, but the reason why we go through this versus why they go through this is totally different reasons. They're not risking their lives. They're not in adrenaline situations. They're not dealing with 480 volts every day. They're not 3,000 feet up in the sky. They're not working with heavy machinery. They're not put through so much stress that would be like, yeah, I can see why that person died at 65 from heart disease, because they're not doing that work. So what is causing the stress? What is causing this damage, right? It's all the traumatic experiences that women go through. I think you probably will see, well, I'm not going to say that, but it's always the traumatic experiences that adds to one's demise. Heart disease, right? What causes heart disease? Stress. What are they stressing about? They're stressing about the consequences that come of the misuse of their physical, emotional, spiritual, mental abilities. That's what they're stressing about. But nonetheless, once again, the point is that it creates trauma. But the trauma for men is actually character building. It's something that we need necessarily in order, and I don't mean negative trauma. I don't mean like, sexual abuse or anything like that. I'm talking about, having to deal with adversity, having to deal with the stresses of the world, having to deal with problem solving, having to deal with cultivating structure. These things are very stressful to do. And if you're a man, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Having to hold yourself accountable is stressful. Okay. And it's traumatic. It's traumatic. And I don't mean, and the thing about trauma, it's usually defined as something that is disturbing or that is distressing. Remember, it's something, because damn near, losing your life in a situation that involved a safety incident is stressful. I've been in those situations. I've been in plenty of situations where I'm like, man, that was a close one. I worked in the power generation field, dealing with high voltage electricity and low voltage, mid voltage as well. And those things are scary. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's stressful to climb up on a pole and service some things. It's stressful. It's especially when you're dealing with live live wires that could kill you, not even being touched, just the job in itself, not even the height. I mean, not even dealing with all of the other atmospheric things that are going on, environmental things that are going on. The rain, the snow, being out in the cold, negative 30-degree weather, all that stuff is stressful. So yes, you can see clearly why I have a character that's built for these things, because I went through the traumatic experiences, the distressing, the disturbing things, right? That's how it's defined literally in the dictionary. But when it comes to women, are they supposed to go through that? Remember, what is men's job? What is men's job? Men's job is to protect and provide. Why? It's so that women don't have to protect and provide for themselves. But since we have arrived at the modern day age that we have, that's exactly what they're doing. But they're not built for that. So they're going through stress. But remember what I said about stress. What does it do? What does stress do? Stress builds, right? It builds character. It builds resilience. It builds toughness. It builds a hard exterior, right? It builds overcoming adversity in the different things, that you go through. It builds masculinity. It helps cultivate it. This is the reason why we put our sons through certain things, a certain rite of passage to prove yourself, to test yourself, to push yourself, to grow and start the fire of that masculinity. Is that necessary for women though? What do you think that does to women? The same thing that we complain about. I'll give you a second to think about it. Let's just think about it. A woman who is going through all of these things that men go through, what effect would that have on women? What effect would it have on her? Especially if she was not built from a child age. She was thrusted into it roughly 16, 17, 18 onward, right? Whereas we're built in survival mode, coming straight out of the womb. They are not. What do you think that does to them? It makes them masculine. That's what it does to them, right? This is the reason why men take on the duties that we do and that we have. But since they want to be equal to us, they now have to bear being masculine. That's the thing about men. We don't have a purpose to be feminine. We don't. It serves no purpose to us, because the only thing femininity works on is men. What do we want to work on another man for? We don't need the femininity usually doesn't work on anything else. I've been through this several times. It only works on men. That's it. In the story. Nothing else. What do men need femininity for? Meaning that what do we need to embrace this in such a way that we need to exude this in our everyday processes just for survival? When do we do that? We don't. We don't need to do that. All we need to do is build our masculinity and continue forward. We really have no use to deal with femininity unless we're trying to relate to women. That's it. That's it. It's not used for anything else. But masculinity, on the other hand, you need in order to move mountains, in order to climb buildings, in order to build skyscrapers, in order to keep structure and infrastructure going within your own household and within the city and the country that you live in. You need masculinity for this. So in order for these women to enter these fields in which you need masculinity for, they're going to have to become masculine, right? They're going to have to go through traumatic experiences disturbing experiences, right? Distressing experiences that, once again, they are not built for. This creates a different type of trauma in women because they're not, once again, built to house a bunch of masculinity. And this is the reason why we see a higher rise in psychosis when it comes to women, in my opinion, because they're taking on things that they should not. That is a repercussion of having to be, or choosing. A lot of them choose to be more masculine. These are the consequences. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I mean, what are you going to tell grown folks? That's what my grandma used to say. Can't tell grown folks nothing. It's true. You tell these women, hey, you should step down as a group, right? And remain in the place of safety and protection and provision. Do what it is that a woman does. Use your femininity to work with men so that men can work for you and work to provide for you. But you have to be submissive. They don't like to hear that. They don't like to hear that. The reason why they don't like to hear that, because there's another thing that masculinity does. It challenges opposition. Once again, we move mountains, we build things, we create frontiers where there are none. It takes masculinity to do that, to oppose the environment and to oppose things that goes against your internal status quo. That's what masculinity does. It challenges in many different ways. It challenges intellectually, mentally, physically, emotionally, rationally. It challenges. It said the environment says, I bet you can't figure that out. Masculinity said, hold my beer. That's what happens. So when you approach these women, what do you think they're going to give you? This is the reason why you get the lip that you do. This is the reason why you get the bite back that you do. The obstinance, you get the lip, you get all the stuff that masculinity gives, because they know they can't beat you head to head. So what they do is they filter it through femininity, but it still has a masculine spearhead on it. It's got a weak shaft because it's built with femininity, but it's still got that little tip on it. And it's not a full tip. It's kind of bent. It's kind of blunted. It doesn't really hurt, but it can do a little damage, right? This is what you're experiencing, man. You're experiencing the traumatic experiences of women. This is what created the masculinity in them. Because this is the same thing, again, that creates the masculinity in men. Same exact thing. Adversity, challenging, saying, hold my beer, right? What do you hear these women said? I don't need no man. If you hear, once again, I don't need no man, it's translated loosely, in my opinion, as I can face all the adversity without you. How can you as a woman face the adversity that I was built for? How? Because you're using, and I like to call it personally, pseudo masculinity. Pseudo masculinity. I've talked about it in previous videos. If you go back to maybe 2 years ago, I've talked about this. Pseudo masculinity. But pseudo masculinity is too close to toxic, because that's actually what toxic masculinity, in my opinion, derive from women. It is a mutation of masculinity. It's toxic because they don't wield it correctly. And they teach it to young boys. Since they don't have a father present, they grow up to perpetuate toxic masculinity, because that's the closest masculinity that they have. And then the women, the children, the female child, she grows up using that as a marker for how men should operate. This is the reason why these women are attracted to the men that they're attracted to, because that's their version of masculinity that they were taught. Remember that I told you that a woman's first introduction to masculinity should be her father. And the father is the one that hands her over. You're seeing the same thing, except for it's toxic masculinity that's taking the place of men. You understand? So the next time you run across a woman and she starts talking all that rah-rah, you know that it's masculinity, but realize that she's went through the same traumatic experiences, if not close to, as you did. This is the reasons why she's masculine. But anyways, like, comment, and share. You can check me out on Facebook. Of course, you can check me out on Patreon. Those things are still up for your leisure. Maybe I should make a nice little catalog, put it all together, because I keep all my videos. And I'll just, put them in a file or something like that. And I'll just slang them for a couple bucks. I don't know. You know me, I'm not really charged up by money or nothing like that. So my life is good, but I'll think about it. You guys got any suggestions? Let me know in the comment section. But anyways, this has been the Wolf in Better Clothes. May you have a good day. And of course, you know it. Peace be with you.